Hi, I'm Carmen,
And I'm Steven, and this is Vienna Past and Present.
where we walk through the gilded and sometimes not so gilded halls of Vienna's history.
So, when you look at any city skyline, you probably think about the architects, the builders who constructed it, monarchs and the royal projects, the people living there and shaping it. But are you considering the effects of attempted assassinations? At least in Vienna, I guess you really should.
Yeah, there's lots of things in history that are kind of randomly related to each other in ways that you wouldn't really guess, right? And so today, we're going to look at one of those random connections in Vienna, namely how an assassination attempt on Emperor Franz Joseph is connected to the height of Vienna's City Hall. So, Stephen, what do you know about any of this? Do you remember anything about the Rathaus, or the City Hall, when you visited Vienna?
Yeah, I remember how it looks. It really dominates the city skyline in my memory, at least like where I was and or maybe where you were living at the time. It's a bit hazy at this point, but from what I remember, it's really cool, striking building, super tall with a skinny spire. Like really great as a city hall as far as those go.
Yeah, I think it's really noticeable. It's got a very Gothic architecture, so it stands out from other buildings sort of around it. But yeah, it's one of the main places that people will go to visit when they visit the city. I just want to make a quick language note. So I said before Rathaus or City Hall. Rathaus is the German word for City Hall, so don't be confused by my kind of switching between the two words because it's the same thing. And on the one hand, it's kind of weird for me. I mean, I know it's weird to insert a German word into an English sentence, but then on the other hand, it also feels way more natural for me to call it the Rathaus rather than City Hall, so I sort of never know what to do.
Yeah, but wait, like of any of the Rathauses out there, like I feel like people probably think of this one, at least in the English language. I mean, I don't have a lot of evidence for that, but I feel like it's kind of the most iconic of those to me.
Maybe.
Is that crazy?
I think Munich is up there too. Munich is one that people know too. And there you have the Rathauskeller, which I think is one of the Oktoberfest places, or somehow I think associated with Oktoberfest, so I think people maybe know that as well. But yeah, the Vienna Rathaus is for sure one of the more famous city halls, I think.
All right, well, we'll allow it here.
So, in any case, I might call it City Hall, I might call it Rathaus. It's the same thing. And so, yeah, like I said, the Rathaus is one of Vienna's most prominent buildings, but it kind of all started with an assassination attempt, which was one of the first attempts to assassinate a Habsburg, but certainly not the last. The most famous and consequential assassination was, of course, Franz Ferdinand.
Right, of World War I starting fame. So we're talking about a different person here.
We are talking about Franz Ferdinand's uncle, which was Kaiser Franz Joseph. So he reigned before Franz Ferdinand. So this is one of the first, big assassination attempts on a Habsburg. Stephen, what, if anything, do you know about Franz Joseph?
Okay. I don't know a whole lot off the top of my head. If I had to pick him out of a lineup, I would go with the one with the largest mustache. How intuitive is that? I'm just kind of, this is like general Habsburg rule of thumb, I think.
I mean, that's pretty on the money, I have to say. Big, bushy mustache is... You would pick him out of a lineup with that, I think, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, big, bushy mustache, kind of very, very prominent, just facial hair in general. It's out of control, actually. And he was one of the longest reigning emperors in history, I think, even. For sure, he was the longest reigning Habsburg. I think he was on the throne for like 70 years or something. So he went through it all.
Wow.
And he saw it all. But he became emperor also very young, obviously. To be on the throne for 70 years, he would have to be pretty young. So he became the emperor in 1848 at the age of just 18. And 1848 was a big year of revolution and political upheaval in Europe. And it wasn't very long before Franz Joseph himself was then directly confronted with the revolutionary spirit of the time.
Okay, so how was he confronted by it? How did this assassination go down?
Well, it was an attempt, but yes.
Right.
So he was very directly confronted with it because on February 18th in 1853, when he was 23 years old, he went for a walk along the city walls accompanied by a senior officer. And so he was walking along the city walls and just kind of looking down on some soldiers doing drills. And as he was watching these soldiers, a man with a long double-edged knife suddenly attacked him from behind. So essentially this guy tried to stab him, but he was saved by his uniform because the knife glanced off the brocade collar, and so it ended up just being a minor stab wound rather than an actual assassination. He was accompanied by a senior officer, and so that guy wrestled the attacker to the ground. And then there was also a random butcher who happened to be passing by, I guess, which it's wild to me how close the general public could get to the emperor. Like, this is a strange detail to me, that a butcher could just be wandering by and, like, help to restrain this attacker, but I guess that's what happened.
Yeah, very strange. Also, I found for his deed, this butcher was later elevated to the nobility by the emperor and became Josef von Ettenreich, according to Wikipedia. So you can't tell me that Austria-Hungary wasn't like a meritocracy here and there.
I guess if you save the emperor, you can get elevated to noble status.
Butcher to noble if you're in the right place at the right time.
In a heartbeat, man. Yeah. So yeah, in terms of this assassination attempt, long story short, the emperor goes out for a walk, he gets stabbed, but his uniform saves him, and it ends up just being a minor wound.
Okay, I also read that he spent a while in bed after this, and the doctors thought he might go blind after the attack. I'm not a medical professional either, but I wonder about the connection to his eyes. That's not intuitive to me. He didn't go blind. He would go on for decades, like you said. Okay, I'd like to talk about the assassin now. We like to represent both sides on this show wherever possible. János Libenyi, I'm probably butchering that. It's a Hungarian name. He was an assistant military tailor who joined the Hungarian resistance movements after witnessing the execution of the 13 martyrs of Arad, where Hungarian rebel generals were executed by Austria-Hungary. That was in 1849, so just shortly before this. And in addition, he believed that Franz Josef seduced his sister, Margit, at the Prater, butchered that as well, a park in Vienna, right? You said that was like the hunting lodge park?
It used to be the hunting grounds of the Habsburgs, so it's a big park now that was then given to the public, but in the 1850s, I'm pretty sure that was still Hungarian hunting grounds. Did I say Hungarian? I meant Habsburg. Habsburg hunting grounds.
Okay. All right. So she was performing a Hungarian traditional dance. I couldn't find much after that, but one source then suggested that he put her through school, so maybe there was something to that. And really, if it was before this assassination, like, he must have been pretty young, the emperor too, right? When he, met this sister. I don't know.
He was 23 at the time of the assassination attempt, so... yeah.
Okay. All right. So anyway, after that, it's said that he decided to try to assassinate him. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, Vienna City Hall.
Right. So we were actually trying to talk about the City Hall.
Right.
So yeah, you might be asking, what does this have to do with any of the buildings along Vienna's Ring Road, which the City Hall is one of the main buildings along the ring. And there is a connection, but it's a little bit, we're going to have one small little excursus into another building before we actually get around to it. So after the assassination attempt, the emperor's brother, who was Archduke Ferdinand Maximilian, he started to collect donations to build a church as a thanks to God for saving the Kaiser's life. And as a random little extra detail, Ferdinand Maximilian would later become the Emperor of Mexico until he was executed by the restored Mexican Republic, which is probably an episode in its own right.
Yeah, I did not expect 1 degree of separation from Mexico in this episode. But, yeah, sounds, Habsburgy. Also, it's kind of interesting, right? Like, this turns into this excuse for, like, a little tax or, like, some donation spree kind of thing. Like, let's do some more building. Right, anytime this happens, whatever. That's super cynical, but in retrospect, I'm just kind of like, okay, you need another church.
Yeah, ultimately that's what it was. Asking for donations. Yeah. Basically, yeah, it was some kind of tax. Although I think, I can't remember now, I did read a little bit about who all donated. I think the federal bank actually donated quite a lot. That was like a large portion of it. But yeah, ultimately, it was the taxpayer, I think.
Donation, yeah. Right.
And I think some nobility also helped to...
So that's how it worked.
Maybe good old Butcher Ettenreich, what did you say his name was? The new nobility?
Yeah.
Maybe he was chipping in.
Okay, we work on that interview next, okay? Find that family.
Yes. So in any case... Ferdinand Maximilian started collecting these donations to build a church, and from those donations, so he did collect quite a lot, and they ended up building the votive church, called the Votivkirche in German, which was one of the most prominent and the only religious building that was built along the Ring Road. And the Ring, maybe I should also explain that very briefly. So you have the center of Vienna, which is the first district, and then around the first district you have what is now called the Ring Road. That used to be the city walls. So that's, the city walls is actually where the Kaiser was observing these soldiers doing their drills when this stabbing happened. And then in the subsequent years, the city walls were torn down, and then you had the Ring Road that was built, and a bunch of new buildings, and a lot of what would be the main tourist track these days in Vienna were built up along the Ring Road. And so the votive church was one of those buildings. It was one of the first buildings that was started. Construction was started in 1856, but it took 23 years to complete the votive church. So this was a long-standing construction site.
Okay, but he actually saw it completed. All right, he lived long enough.
He did live long enough to see it completed. He lived long enough to see a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, but this is supposed to be about the city hall and not about a church.
City hall.
So let me try to bring this back to City Hall, which was actually supposed to be the point. Right, so like I said, along the Ring Road, lots of construction was going on. So this whole road was being built and all the buildings along the road around the same time. And so the Rathaus was also built around this time from 1872 until 1883. An extra detail that I like about the Rathaus is that during construction, there was a debate about whether to add a chapel or a wine cellar, or both. And in true Viennese fashion, they decided that the chapel was not needed and was rejected, but the wine cellar was approved because, a wine cellar is a necessity.
Okay, their true colors are showing here, which I really like. Plus, they already have enough cellars full of skulls and stuff like that, in Vienna. So I think this is a good choice.
Yeah, you have a lot of these plague mass graves and stuff with skulls and bones. Yeah, so a wine cellar, I think, is the way to go.
Let's get a drink.
Okay, on that note, this seems like a good place to take a little break.
Hello, my name is April, and I'm the host of the history podcast, Dorky. Dorky is 2 words, door and key. It's a play on the word dorky, which is really fitting because I'm a dork who loves to talk about history and random events and people from history. So come join me as I dive into these events and people. From Ötzi the Iceman to Studio 54, I cover it all in a way that's easy to consume. Get ready to hear a new and different perspective and gain a deeper understanding of the past while having some fun along the way. Welcome to Dorky. You can find and subscribe to Dorky anywhere you listen to podcasts. And Dorky is on all social medias as DorkyPod. So be sure to check all of that out as well. Talk to you soon, friends.
And now we're slowly getting to the point. Because the votive church was dedicated to his life being saved, the Kaiser decreed that the spire of the city hall could not be higher than the spire of the votive church. And the votive church was 99 meters tall. So basically he said that nothing along the Ring Road, including the city hall or the Rathaus, could be taller than that 99-meter tall spire of the votive church.
Okay.
And technically, indeed, the city hall spire is only 97.9 meters tall, so it is slightly shorter than the votive church. But in very Viennese fashion, the architect immediately set out to bend the rules and to figure out a way to kind of get around this. So, enter the Rathausmann.
Okay.
If you look closely at the city hall, and you do have to look pretty closely, you will notice that at the top of the central spire, which is the tallest one, there's a statue, which is the Rathausmann, or the City Hall Man. And he is officially not a part of the spire, but he stands at 5.4 meters tall, and he's fashioned as a knight holding a flag. So it's effectively a statue on top of the building of this knight who has a flag in his hand.
Okay, is he special in any way, or is he just there to make it taller? Like a knight with a flag, it's not sounding super special right now.
No, he's not any particular person. Really, it was just to make the building taller.
No particular person even. Love that.
There's nothing particularly special about him except that he's not technically part of the building and he's tall. And so it basically was a way to skirt the rules because the Rathaus, including the Rathausmann, is just over 103 meters tall. But because this statue on top, the Rathausmann, is not officially part of the building and not officially part of the spire, it technically does not violate the emperor's decree.
Merely a statue resting on top of the tower. Got it.
Not part of the building. Exactly. And I have to say, this is so Viennese to me.
Okay, so they're rule benders? Because I wouldn't automatically think that.
Yes, absolutely, they are rule benders. So they kind of make it seem like they're following the rules, but a lot of the times they're not. And I just remember one of the first things that was told to me that I really still remember, and I come back to it every now and then. When I started studying here, I went to the student coordinator at some point and was kind of, worried that I hadn't taken the right courses or that I didn't have the prereqs that I needed or whatever. And he kind of just said to me like, okay, Carmen, first things first. And I'll say it in German, but then I'll translate it. So in German, he said to me, Carmen, in Wien gibt's immer einen Hinterweg, meaning, Carmen, in Vienna, there's always a back way or some back door. Basically, if you haven't totally followed the rules, we'll find a way anyway. And yeah, that is kind of how Vienna operates.
Okay. I mean, hey, that sounds pragmatic too, so.
It is. It's more like we follow the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law. We're pretty good at that.
It sounds very, the most livable city to me. Okay.
Yeah. So there's quite a long history of this, and already back in the 1850s, 60s, they were kind of coming up with ways to do this. And so, yeah, you have this Rathausmann standing on top of the building, and that makes it actually taller than the votive church, but officially it does follow kind of the official rules.
Okay.
However, because it is so high up, it's almost 100 meters where the statue is standing, you can't really see it very well. But for anybody who happens to be in Vienna or, wants to come to Vienna and wants a close-up look, there is a replica of the statue in the park directly in front of City Hall, so you can see what the statue actually looks like.
Okay.
That's on top of the building.
Handy.
Handy, indeed. So what's the legacy of all of this? The assassination attempt directly influenced the look of the Ring Road, which is where many of Vienna's most beautiful buildings are, because it created the impetus to build the votive church in the first place. And the votive church then further influenced the height of the nearby City Hall. And they are very nearby. Actually, I didn't mention that before, but it's, a 10-minute walk maybe from one to the other. And then these height restrictions immediately brought out Viennese inventiveness in skirting the rules while supposedly still sticking to them.
Okay.
And ultimately, I think a relatively minor assassination attempt in the Grand Habsburg scheme of things left a very direct mark on the look of the city at the end of the day. And even today, the votive church is the second highest church in the city after the St. Stephen's Cathedral, officially. But the City Hall kind of cheekily manages to be taller unofficially.
Officially and unofficially. Nice.
Yes, you always have to differentiate between those two.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I would not, look upon a city skyline and necessarily think that, a governing force was this failed assassination.
Yeah, you wouldn't think so. Although, the heights of buildings is definitely a topic in the city. Most of it is not related to an assassination attempt, which is probably good. But in general, how the city looks and the skyline obviously is a big discussion in every city. And Vienna has had many, many other sort of discussions around this. But I think this is one of the earliest, as far as I know, one of the earliest restrictions on how high buildings can be. And on the whole, Vienna is not a particularly high city compared to American cities, right? It's built pretty low.
Right.
And this was one of those first restrictions on how high a building was allowed to be, although, of course, they did get around it slightly, but by a couple of meters only.
Right, and it makes a lot of sense. You have to kind of, when I picture this actual conversation, right, where they're like, okay, it's decreed that it must not be any higher than 99 meters. I can't imagine that it was the Kaiser's idea, right? It was probably some architect being like, oh, hey, let's put this in front of him. And then let's say the reason is because, this church needs to be the highest because of you. There would probably architects or some other force behind this. I kind of wonder about that. And that, to me, really is kind of brilliant foresight in a lot of ways. Because, yes, it does really make this skyline skyline, it has its most beautiful buildings are its most prominent, right? Like so many European cities, like you're saying, they have these kind of lower skylines, and a lot of their older buildings are more prominent. It's a different kind of thing, right? And American or, non-European architecture, that's great too, but very different. So I just wonder about like the little workings that led to them bringing that before the Kaiser and being like, oh yeah, we're doing this for you, right? For your church. We're so glad you weren't killed.
Because you were saved. So this is all in honor of, your majesty.
Mm-hmm.
No, but that's actually a very interesting point that you raise. I don't know if there were sort of these machinations behind that, but I could imagine it as well.
Yeah.
And if so, really good foresight, actually, in a way, to think about how a city looks and how further city planning might affect, your skyline and what kind of skyline you want to have.
It's just these little hidden heroes, okay? Like that architect or whoever, that butcher, okay? Okay. Strong supporting cast in this one.
Yeah, the butchers, the architects, the people in the background, kind of, making it work. So that more or less is the story of how the city's skyline, or at least one specific building in any case, but I would say actually probably the skyline in a lot of ways, like as a sort of knock-on effect from that, are connected to an assassination attempt of the emperor in 1853.
Don't forget to tip your butcher. Right?
Yes. He might be a lord this time next week,
That's right.
Or a duke or whatever these people become.
Evidently, yes.
Okay, so that's it for our show. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, share with your friends or leave us a 5-star review. And if you didn't like it, then, well, don't worry about that review.
You can find us on social medias, Vienna Past and Pres on Instagram, or send us your episode ideas at viennapastandpresent@gmail.com.
Auf Wiedersehen, pfiat euch, Baba.
Bye.